Let's turn to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. This looks like a just big middle finger to the country to get that close to the border and then fly home to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's really scary to me. It's dumb, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible to say what he did. There's one of two things going on here, Jesse. He understands the border is broken, that there's enough fentanyl coming across the border on his watch to kill us 10 times over. 90 people on the terrorist watch list have come here and got out into our country, that 5 million illegal immigrants have crossed since he's been president, and he doesn't care to fix it, or he's clueless about what's going on. Either way, it is an irresponsible thing for the president to say and do. It is dereliction of duty, and if he really understands what's going on at the border, and he's not going to go visit and give morale boost to the border agents who are being overrun, he's the worst president. This is going to define his presidency. This was a dumb, dangerous thing to say. So he either knows what's going on and doesn't give a damn, or he's clueless. And I think he's clueless. I don't think he has any idea what's going on at the border. He had no idea what would happen when he withdrew from Afghanistan. We're going to have another terrorist attack on our country coming through a broken southern border because of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. He has no idea what's going on at the border.
Yeah, and he's going to blame someone else when a terrorist scurries across and plants some pipe bomb at one of our buildings. What as a U.S. Senator, what can you do to force his hand on border security?
Number one, when we take the House, I met with Jim Jordan today, come up with a border security plan that eliminates asylum claims in America. Why are so many coming here? If they get 1 foot in the country, they claim asylum, they never get deported. Stop making asylum claims in our country. You have to apply outside of our country. Finish the wall. We can come up with a plan to deal with the fentanyl problem, with a broken border. We can drive the narrative because we have the House and challenge Democrats in the Senate to vote against a border security plan. I just want to say this again. I don't believe President Biden understands what's going on at the border. I think he's clueless, because if he did understand what was going on at the border and wouldn't go down there to do something about it, he deserves to be impeached.
You're saying the president, because he's been derelict in his job as executing the duties as commander-in-chief, could face impeachment for not securing the southern border?
I think this is criminally negligent by the DHS leadership. They're allowing drugs to flow in our country to kill thousands of Americans every year. They're allowing terrorists to come in our country, and they're doing nothing to fix it. So I think it's dereliction of duty by the commander-in-chief to allow this to happen and not make corrective action. I think it's irresponsible for him not to visit the border and talk to the agents firsthand about what's going on. Why is he not going? Apparently he doesn't want to know what's going on.
Well, he told those other guys that were caught not whipping the other border crossers, he told them to go have desk duty. I mean, that's why he doesn't want a picture of him next to border agents, because his base will go nuts.
Joe Biden has surrendered the border to drug cartels and criminal elements, and terrorists are coming through that border. It's a matter of time till they kill a bunch of us if we don't make corrective action. The only time he gets involved on border issues is to go after the Border Patrol. The Republican Party needs to put together a plan in January of next year, pass it through the House, and challenge Democrats up for election in 2024 to either be with us or against us. The President of the United States, when it comes to the southern border, has surrendered it. He's derelict in his duty, and I don't think he has a clue of the threats we face as a nation from withdrawing from Afghanistan. If he had a clue, he wouldn't have done it. And to not do something about the border, giving all the facts we've just talked about on your show, what could you say other than dereliction of duty?
He has waved the white flag. Do you think he's not being briefed? I mean, this is a national security issue. You're not having guys with medals come and brief him and show him footage of this attack on the border?
This is the key question. Who has told him, and what have they told him? Has he been informed that there's more fentanyl coming across the border than any time in history? It's up by 400 and something %, enough to kill everybody 10 times over. Is he aware of the fact that we've had 90 people on the terrorist watch list come through the border, evade detection? Is he aware of the fact that 5 million people come across the border illegally with no end in sight? If he knows that and he does nothing about it, then he is derelict in his duty. If he doesn't know that, the people around him are derelict in their duty. Here's That's what I think. I think the man is clueless.
Yeah.
I don't think he has a damn idea at all about what's going on at the border, because to know about it, you would want to do something about it.
I'm in complete agreement. Senator Lindsey Graham, thanks for joining us as always.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.